Question number 23. So question number 23 wants you to solve a quadratic by using the quadratic formula and then trying to round it, okay? So the quadratic formula is this formula right here, which is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So yep, I made it into a little song just so I can remember it, okay? So again, guys, that is the quadratic formula, all right? So this quadratic formula helps you to find something called your roots, all right? And another name for roots is x-intercepts. You might be more familiar with that word, or zeros, okay? Which is essentially just the x values, all right? So that's what this quadratic formula helps us to do, okay? So again, there's other ways to find roots, because again, you can just put it into factored form, but the quadratic formula actually does it for you by just calculating it with the coefficients in front of those terms, okay? So first things first, whenever you're doing or you're using this formula, you need to make sure that you have the standard form for a quadratic, so all your terms need to be on the same side, all right? So when I look at my first equation, all the terms are on the same side, okay? So what I'm going to do, guys, is that I'm going to rewrite my quadratic formula just so that I can recall it, guys, okay? Because the more you guys can write it, the more you will recall it, okay? So all over 2a. So a lot of times I'll set it up like this, where I'll set it up as negative parentheses plus or minus the square root of parentheses squared minus 4 parentheses, all being divided by 2 parentheses. So what did I do there, guys? Yup, I replaced all the letters with parentheses, all right? Because what I'm going to do is that I'm going to plug numbers inside, and this will make it easier for me to plug them inside, all right? So you're probably wondering, what are these A, B's, and C's that I'm talking about? Well, technically in front of our equation, all right, or in front of my x squared is a number. That number is a 1, and that actually represents your A. The number in front of your x represents your b, and your constant represents your c, all right? So again, we're going to plug in those numbers. So I'm going to plug in b first, so I plug negative 11 inside. Plug in my b again, so I plug in negative 11 again. Plug in my a is positive 1. Plug in my c is negative 6. And plug in my a finally, and my a is positive 1. All right? So a lot of times, some persons will list the numbers on the side. So they'll list that their a is 1, their b is negative 11, and their c is negative 6, just so that they can remember what they are. All right? So again, you can do that if that helps. Okay? So all I'm going to do now is just use this to calculate. All right? So again, I'm going to have that x is equal to, so in front of here is a negative 1. Negative 1 times negative 11 is positive 11. All right? Plus or minus the square root of negative 11 squared is negative 11 times negative 11, which is positive 121. Negative 4 times positive 1 is negative 4. And negative 4 multiplied by negative 6 is positive 24. Okay? And then for our denominator, 2 times 1 is 2. So when I continue to calculate the 11, I'll just write it again, plus or minus the square root, because again, I can calculate something underneath the square root. So 21 plus 24 will give me, or 121 plus 24 will give me 145. Okay? All being divided by 2. Okay, so right now, guys, we will just evaluate this plus or minus sign. So this plus or minus sign means that it could be a positive number or a negative number right here. Okay, so this can be rewritten as 11 plus square root 145 over 2, or 11 minus square root of 145 all divided by 2. All right. So again, guys, we will end up having two answers, okay? Because again, whenever we're finding these roots of a quadratic, we always end up with two x values, okay? So something like this now, I would just go ahead and put in my calculator. Alrighty, so for the first one right here, 11 plus square root of 145 over 2, I got 11.5207. Alright, but it says that we need to round, alright? It says round to the nearest tenth. So that's what it says right here. Tenth, I would look at the first number after the decimal point, or rather the second number after the decimal point. If that number is 5 or larger, then the number to the left will go up by 1 point. Because it's not 5 or larger, our answer would be just the 11.5. So again, one of our answers is 11.5. Okay? So now let's get our next answer, guys. So let's get our next answer. All right. So again, I would now calculate this right here. So 11 minus square root of 145 divided. Alrighty, so when I calculate this, I got negative 0.5207, alright, but it says round to the nearest tenth, so I look at the second number after the decimal point. Because it's not 5 or larger, my answer is negative 0.5. So again, my next answer is negative 0.5. So again, you can actually just put all this right here in your calculator. But again, I don't want to always have to rely 100% on the calculator. Sometimes I try to not rely on it. Okay? So let's try to do the next question. So again, the question wants us to find those x values using our quadratic formula. All right? So first things first, I need to make sure that everything is on the same side. Okay? So how do I move an x squared to the other side? I would subtract x squared on both sides of my equations. Would I subtract it from 5x squared, negative 6x, or negative 11? Yup, from the 5x squared, because that's the like term. And technically in front of this x squared is a negative 1. Alright? So this cancels out. How do I move a negative 9x to the other side? I would add 9x to both sides. Would I add it to 5x squared, negative 6x, or negative 11? Yup, to the negative 9x, because that's the like term. Okay? And this gets canceled. Okay? So now we're going to calculate 5x squared minus 1x squared is 4x squared. Negative 6x plus 9x, I am adding something to it, I will get positive 3x. Okay? The negative 11, I'm not adding anything to it, so I bring it down. Okay? And everything canceled out, so we're left with nothing, and 0 represents nothing. Okay? So now we have everything on the same side, and we now have that standard form for a quadratic, okay? So now we're going to go ahead and use our quadratic formula, okay? So again, our quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. But a lot of times, I like to set it up like this, where I write it as negative 1 parentheses plus or minus the square root of parentheses squared minus 4 parentheses all over 2 parentheses, which makes it a little easier for me to plug in my a, b, and c's. All right. So you're probably wondering, what are these a, b, and c's we're talking about? Well, our a is that 4, which is in front of our x squared. Our b is that 3, and my c is that negative 11, which is my constant. So I plug in my b first, and my b is 3. Plug in my b again, and my b is 3. Plug in my a is 4. Plug in my c is negative 11. Plug in my a again, and my a again is 4. So again, guys, a lot of times you can go ahead and list out what your a, b, and c's are on the side, just so that you don't get confused, okay? So again, you can list them out on the side just so that you don't get confused, okay? So in actuality, you can actually plug all of this in your calculator, but I'm not going to use my calculator that much, so I'm going to go ahead and try to calculate it, okay? So we're going to have x is equal to negative 1 times 3 is negative 3, plus or minus the square root of 3 squared is 9, negative 4 times 4 is negative 16, and negative 16 times 11, I believe, is positive 176. All right. All over 2 multiplied by negative 4. All right. Oh, that's not a negative 4 because, again, our A is positive 4. You see how this helped us? All right. This must have been a little scribble. Okay. So 2 times positive 4 is 8. Okay. So we have negative 3 plus or minus. So we still have to calculate something underneath here. So 9 plus 176 is 185. Okay. All being divided by 8. Okay. So this is telling me, so again, I see a plus or minus sign. So that means that this could be negative 3 plus the square root of 185 all over 8, or negative 3 minus the square root of 185 all over 8. Okay, so I'm going to now put this in my calculator. Alright guys, so we got 1.3251, says round to the nearest tenth. So I look at the second number after the point. Because it's not 5 or larger, my answer would be 1.3. Okay, so again, my first answer for this question is 1.3. Okay, so now let's find our next answer, guys. So let's find our next answer. Alright guys, so we got negative, so again we got, I'm going to try to squeeze it here, negative 2.075, it says round to the nearest tenth, so I look at the second number after the decimal point. Because it is 5 or larger, this 0 is going to go up to a 1, so this would be negative 2.1. Alright, so again guys, just like that.